Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, House Bill 2621A comes to this House from your Judiciary Committee, where it received unanimous support. Since 1978, Oregon has had a crime victims compensation program funded by the state and federal government, which provides victims of violent crime with financial support for medical, counseling, and other expenses. This program is vital for crime victims who have very often had their lives interrupted by very traumatic events. This bill modifies reporting requirements and increases access to the program for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. We know as a result of the trauma, victims of these types of crimes do not always report a crime immediately or participate in the prosecution. House Bill 2621A eliminates the requirement that the victim fully cooperate with law enforcement officials and the assessment of whether or not the victim engaged in substantial provocation with the assailant. Essentially, these changes were a way to make participants eligible for the program in order to make it more accessible to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. The bill also directs the Oregon Department of Justice to establish a program for victims of domestic violence or sexual assault who are not eligible for an award from the compensation fund. It increases the maximum amount of compensable loss of a victim's earnings or support from $400 to $600 a week. It includes the cost of forensic interviews related to child abuse and certain prescription medications prescribed in conjunction with counseling. It authorizes the DOJ to extend a 30-day period for reconsideration of compensation orders with the victim's consent. And it authorizes DOJ to obtain police reports and child abuse reports for the purposes of the Crime Victim Compensation Fund. This bill is an important step in ensuring that victims of violent crime who do not have insurance or other means of support are not further victimized by the financial burden. I want to thank the representative from Medford for asking some questions about why this bill didn't go to Ways and Means, and so I want to put that on the record. This bill, the question is, this bill eliminates the requirement for compensation awards for victims who cooperate fully. Will this increase the cost? Out of 5,000 claims last year, DOJ only denied 15 claims for non-cooperation. Any impact on this program would be minuscule. It's a fairly rare fact pattern that applies in a very small number of cases. The amount is too small to require a fiscal impact. The second question, this bill establishes a new DOJ program for victims of domestic violence or sexual assault who are not otherwise eligible. Will this additional requirement require dollars to establish? No, it won't cost any additional money to establish. There will be some amount of continuing operational costs, but it will largely rest within the current infrastructure. We do not know yet what the impact would be, but the main point remains it is a small subset of victims and the impact is minimal. Third question, the bill increases the maximum amount of compensation for or of loss of income from $400 to $600 a week. Will this require additional funds to fund this increase? No, the loss of income award total will stay the same, to $20,000. The Crime Victims Compensation Fund will simply be able to pay out more per week. The total cap remains unmodified. And finally, this bill adds coverage for prescription medications up to $1,500 for survivors of deceased victims. Will this require additional dollars? No, the medication will be paid out of the survivor's counseling benefit already awarded to the survivor. So thank you to the representative from Medford. I wanted to make that record, and I urge your aye vote.